In a quiet valley, wrapped between green mountains and golden skies, where mango trees swayed beside cobbled roads and the air smelled of earth and spice, lived a young woman named Zara, a name that villagers spoke with both admiration and envy. She was the daughter of Yusuf, the wealthiest merchant in the province, a man who owned entire trade routes, whose name opened palace gates and bent the ears of rulers. Zara had grown up surrounded by silk and sapphire, by honeyed dates and fine horse-drawn carriages, but not once did she feel free. Her beauty, like her father's fortune, had become her prison. Men from far lands came to ask for her hand, each with polished shoes and practiced words, each one more interested in her father's inheritance than her soul. Inside, she longed for something no one offered, to be seen not as a prize, but as a person. Zara dreamed not of diamonds, but of purpose, not of a husband, but a companion who could sit beside her in silence and still understand her heart. And so she crafted a plan as bold as the winds that danced over the valley. She would hire a man, not a lover, not a suitor, but someone to play the role of her husband in front of the world. A contract, a performance crafted with care, meant not to deceive, but to deflect, to buy time, to breathe, to reclaim her space in a world that only saw her as currency. After yet another suitor praised her golden earrings and her family's influence more than her mind or laughter, she stood in her father's marble hall, her fists clenched, and said, "Father, I am done. I will not be married off like cargo on your ships. I will write my own story, and it will not begin with a price tag." Her father, whose beard had turned silver with wisdom and trade, looked at her with tired eyes. "My daughter," he whispered, "marriage is not a game." "I know," she replied, "which is why I will choose not a husband, but a shield." A shield. A performance, a temporary escape from expectations. The man would be paid fairly, live with her as a husband in name only, and in return, she would finally silence the endless proposals. The idea was strange, even dangerous, but it felt right. And so, through discreet channels, an anonymous message was posted, seeking a man of integrity to enter a short-term marital arrangement. Compensation generous, status irrelevant. Intentions must be honest, no questions asked. Over the next week, men came from everywhere. Some reeked of cologne and ambition, others spoke in riddles and flattery. But none passed the one simple test Zara had created in her heart. Could she breathe freely beside them? Then, on the last day, just as the sun kissed the mountain ridge, a tall man in plain linen stepped into the courtyard. His name was Django. He carried no flowers, no titles, no smile to win approval, but his eyes were steady, like someone who had walked through fire and come out stronger. When Zara asked why he was here, he said simply, "Because you are trying to reclaim your life, and I believe in those who dare." He didn't ask about her wealth. He didn't try to charm her. Instead, he asked her what freedom smelled like to her. And that, somehow, was the question that sealed it. She offered him the role. Django accepted. "But," he said, "I'm not doing this for the gold. I'm doing it because you need someone to remind you of your power, not protect it, not use it, just hold it gently until you can." And just like that, they signed the contract. 3 months, no romance, just an agreement. What Zara didn't know, as she watched him walk through her estate gates that evening, was that Django was not who he claimed to be. Beneath the quiet manor and worn sandals lived a man with a hidden name, a hidden life, and a reason for walking into her story that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with destiny. But for now, the arrangement had begun, and the clock was quietly ticking toward the truth.
Zara had expected her days with Django to be awkward, perhaps even cold, a forced partnership of shared space and staged affection. But what she hadn't expected was the calm that began to settle over her home like early morning mist. Django was not loud, not boastful, not curious about the luxuries of her life. He rose early and read under the neem tree. He spoke to the servants as equals. He never entered her room uninvited. And when they dined together, his silences were warm, not heavy. Zara found herself telling him things she had never voiced aloud, about the loneliness of being adored for the wrong reasons, about how gold could buy comfort but never sincerity, about how her laughter had become performance, her smiles currency. Django listened, never interrupting, never judging, and when he finally spoke, it was always in metaphors that stayed with her for hours. Some people, he once said, live inside palaces with barred windows, never realizing the door is unlocked. Slowly, Zara began to feel that door creaking open. They began appearing together at town festivals and gatherings. Whispers spread. Zara has married, finally. The suitors vanished. The gossips grew bored, and Zara, for the first time in her adult life, breathed in peace. But not all peace is pure, because soon a new tension crept in, not from outside, but from within her. She began noticing things. Django's hands, though worn, bore the calluses of both labor and leadership. His knowledge was deep, too deep for a man who claimed to have drifted from village to village. He spoke Swahili, Arabic, French, and could quote philosophers she'd only read in her father's imported books. He knew how to fix the estate's irrigation system, how to read market charts, and how to calm a panicked horse. It was as if he had lived many lives, yet he spoke of none. One night as they walked through the spice garden, she asked, "Why don't you ever talk about your past?" Django looked up at the stars and replied, "Because the past has a way of becoming a prison when told too soon. But I hired a man with no history, yet I feel you carry more of it than anyone I've ever known." He smiled but didn't answer, and that silence, for the first time, unsettled her. Days passed. They shared laughter, even moments of quiet joy, planting herbs, racing horses, helping children in the village school. And yet, something remained hidden between them, like a locked chest in a familiar room. The villagers loved Django. So did the staff. Even Sophia, Zara's oldest confidant, once whispered, "If he were truly just a hired man, why does he walk like someone who has known command?" Zara began to wonder, who was this man who seemed to have no past, but infinite wisdom? Then came the letter. A dusty rider galloped into the estate just before dusk, his robe stained, his breath shallow. Zara opened the sealed parchment with trembling hands. It was from the capital. Her father was gravely ill, poisoned, suspected foul play, immediate return requested. Her world shook. Yusuf, the lion of the marketplace, the untouchable, was falling. She turned to Django in panic. "I have to go," she said. He nodded. "Then we leave at dawn." "No," she hesitated. "This is a family matter." Django's gaze deepened. Not cold, but firm, like waves before a storm. "Zara," he said, voice slow and steady, "it's time you learn the truth." She stared at him, the wind still in her lungs. And in that moment, something shifted. Not in Django, but in her. She no longer saw him as the quiet stranger she had hired. She saw something older, larger, like someone who had stepped out of another world to guide her through hers. The next morning, as they rode together through the valleys towards the capital, Zara felt her chest tighten with questions. Who exactly had she invited into her life, and why did it feel, even in the face of grief, that he was the only constant left in a world that had always demanded she pretend. She didn't know it yet, but the man riding beside her held a truth that would not only change how she saw him, but how she saw herself.
The capital city was no longer as Zara remembered it. Its domes of white sandstone now cast long, tired shadows, and the guards who once bowed with cheerful reverence now looked over their shoulders with unease. Power, she realized, had a scent, and tonight it smelled like fear. Inside the grand estate where she had grown up, the walls seemed to echo with whispers, not music. Her father, once a towering presence draped in flowing robes and wisdom, now lay beneath soft linens, his eyes sunken, his breath shallow, his voice a ghost of itself. "Zara," he murmured as she held his hand, "you've come back." She nodded, tears threatening. "They said you were poisoned. Who would do this?" Her father closed his eyes. "Enemies. Within. I trusted too many." Before she could press him for names, the door creaked open, and Django stepped inside. For a moment, Yusuf stared at him, as if recognizing a phantom from a dream. His lips moved slowly. It's you." Zara turned, confused. "What do you mean, father? Who is he?" Django did not flinch. He stepped forward and took off the linen scarf that had always been around his neck, the only adornment he ever wore, and from beneath it pulled out a medallion shaped like a lion surrounded by 7 stars. Her breath caught. She had seen that emblem only once, on a rare document her father kept locked in a chest, a list of the most powerful private financiers on the continent. "I am Django Moyo," he said quietly, his voice carrying the calm weight of finality. "Founder of Moyo Enterprises, owner of 47 firms across agriculture, tech, and infrastructure. Your father once called me his rival, but I never saw him that way." Zara stumbled backward. Her heart thundered. "You lied to me?" Django stepped closer. "No. I hid who I was, but I never lied. I never said I was poor. I said I valued things earned by my own hands. Why come into my life? Why pretend?" "Because," Django said, eyes fixed on hers, "I was meant to meet you long before you ever hired me." He explained then how years ago, during a negotiation with Zara's father, he had seen her once from afar. She had been standing alone in a garden, watching the koi swim with a sadness in her gaze he'd never forgotten. He had walked away from the deal that day, convinced that the world she lived in was no place for the kind of freedom she deserved. When he heard rumors of her offer, something stirred in him, not ambition, but purpose. He wanted to know if that girl in the garden had found her voice, and if not, he would help her find it. Zara stood frozen between disbelief and revelation. "So, this was all part of a plan?" Django's voice dropped to a whisper. "No, it became a mission. I came to protect you, and something else." He turned to Yusuf, who nodded weakly. "Your father and I were once allies, before power drove us apart, but we were betrayed from within. That betrayal poisoned him, and now it threatens you." He handed Zara a sealed envelope, her father's will, and a key to a vault hidden beneath the manor library. "They want everything, his empire, his name, and now his heir, you." "But I never wanted any of this," Zara cried. "I just wanted peace." "Peace," Django said gently, "must be defended by fire. And you are not just your father's daughter, Zara. You are your own storm." That night, she sat alone in her childhood room, staring at the vault key, the past she had tried to escape now opening a door to her future. She thought of the girl who had once written an ad for a fake husband. That girl was gone. In her place stood a woman faced with a choice: walk away and live quietly, or stay and reclaim what had been built from sweat and sacrifice. By dawn, her mind was clear. She would not be a pawn. She would not be hidden behind men, titles, or old shadows. She would face her father's enemies, not with fear, but with everything they never saw coming. Dawn came quietly, but the sky did not feel gentle. It was laced with the tension of something about to break, like the hush before the first drumbeat in a war song. Zara stood at the manor's edge, barefoot in the garden where she once played as a child, now a woman with the weight of generations pressing on her shoulders. Behind her, the corridors of the estate whispered with betrayal. Names she trusted, faces she knew, now exposed by the contents of the vault her father had guarded with silence. Letters, ledgers, secret deals, proof that the sickness in her father's empire had not come from strangers, but from men who ate at his table. They always wanted the crown, she said aloud, voice steady despite the storm within, but they never had the courage to build the kingdom. Django stood beside her, not as a savior, but as a mirror. He had told her everything the night before, how he had been offered a seat at the table years ago, how he declined when he saw what greed had done to those around her father, and how he chose to disappear into the crowd, biding his time, watching. But this was never about revenge. It was about restoration. They think you're still that girl behind veils and silk. They don't know you've already taken off the armor of expectation. Zara turned to him, calm and fierce. They will. That afternoon, she summoned the council. Men who had run the empire while her father lay in bed, men who smiled in public and signed in shadows. They gathered in the hall, expecting tears, perhaps hesitation. What they found was Zara in her white robe, no gold, no crown, just truth in her voice and fire in her eyes. My father built this with trust, and you fed on it like locusts. Today, that ends. Every deal you made, every stolen coin, every lie, accounted for. And if you resist, I will not hesitate to burn this down and rebuild it with my bare hands. Silence. Then one man laughed. You are a girl who hired a fake husband to escape a proposal. What do you know of leadership? Django stepped forward, but Zara raised her hand. She did not need defending. She said, I know this, her voice unwavering. The man I hired turned out to be more loyal than any of you who grew fat off my father's name. I know that peace isn't given, it's claimed. And I know now that power means nothing unless it protects the powerless. And then calm precision, she revealed the documents, the embezzlements, the bribery, the attempt to take her father's life through a silent poison masked as medicine. One by one they fell, not from swords or soldiers, but from exposure, the kind of truth no title could defend against. In the weeks that followed, Zara reorganized everything. She sold the vineyards that no longer served the people. She opened schools and trade centers in the villages where her father's goods once passed untouched. She paid the workers more. She cut deals not for glory, but for growth. People saw her not as a merchant's daughter, but as a leader in her own right. And Django? He did not leave. He stayed, not in the shadows, but beside her. When asked what he was to her, she replied only, the man who reminded me I could write my own story. They never announced a wedding, never flaunted love like a flag, but their bond was unmistakable, stronger than gold, deeper than vows. Together, they built something neither of them had dreamed when this strange journey began. One evening, years later, as the sun dipped behind the hills and laughter from the nearby village echoed through the garden, Zara sat beneath the old fig tree where she once questioned everything. A young girl from the village, curious-eyed and barefoot, approached her and asked, Mama Zara, is it true you married a stranger because you didn't want to get married? Zara smiled, her gaze stretching toward the fading sky. No, child. I hired a stranger to protect my peace. But what I found was a partner for my purpose. The girl grinned and ran off, her feet kicking dust and dreams into the wind. And Zara, heart light and full, leaned back against the tree and whispered, The richest life is the one you choose with courage.